There's some exciting new developments in the world of landscape planning. It's now possible to take a drone and have a drone fly over a site. Here's a site in Florida in the USA, and the drone flies a flight plan that takes it directly over the site in question, and then the software available with the drone will stitch together all the images to produce high resolution images such as the ones you see here. The problem is that when you stitch together, in some cases hundreds of images, you get a massive file. That slows your computer down, and gCADPlus in fact might even object to putting files of massive size into its environment. The one we're looking at here, when it's sent to me from one of our users, was 600 megabytes in size. There are a number of tools that you could use to take the image. You can see here I'm in Photoshop, and the image size here is over 600 megabytes, which is a massive image. So we could use Photoshop to rotate and adjust this image so that it can be used in gCADPlus. Now I'm opening it now as a 600 megabytes file, and I have a fast computer here, but it's taking quite a long time in Photoshop to load it. You may notice that the file format generated by the software associated with the drone has made a TIFF file, and it's easier for gCADPlus to take an image file in the form of a JPEG file or a PNG file. So the first thing we're going to do is to say image and rotate the canvas, and we'll rotate it 90 degrees clockwise, and there we have it. I'll just Control plus to zoom in the Photoshop environment. So here's our image. We could use the tools in Photoshop to sharpen the image or do automatic adjustment, auto levels. That's now being applied here, and the image is slightly darkened. But I digress. What we want to do is to resample this image. If we say now image size, the image width is 23,000 pixels. Now when we're exporting a raster or a bitmapped image from gCADPlus, we know that we want to stay under about 9,000 pixels wide. So what I'm going to do now is reduce the width of this, and that will reduce its size. So we'll go about halfway in the 9,000 limit in gCADPlus. So we'll go 4,500 pixels wide, which is still a massive image, and we'll adjust the resolution. Now the original TIFF file was done at 300 dots per inch, and we'll reduce that to 150 dots per inch. So the file size now is 78.3 megabytes. It was 500. So you can see we've reduced it by about a factor of 10. So I'm going to say let's come down to 4,000, and we're now down to 14 megabytes. It's still a very big file, but remember it's a TIFF file. It's what's called an uncompressed TIFF file at this stage. So what I'll now do is go File and Save As, and I'll put it on the desktop here called Landman Ortho. It's actually been misnamed a little here. It was going to be .tiff, and we don't want that. But the format we now want to use is a JPEG format, and we know that JPG or JPEG formats files go happily into gCADPlus, and I'll save that. Well, let's change its name to, so that it's at the top of our list. We'll go AAA from Photoshop, and we'll save it. And we'll say for quality, let's imagine we want maximum quality, and we'll go OK. So now we can close that TIFF version of the file, and we'll say yes, we want to save the changes. And now we can go File and Open from our desktop our file, and you can see we're now down to 2.8 megabytes, which is big, but maybe what you are interested in is getting a really nice, crisp and detailed image, and gCADPlus can tolerate a file of that size, but we've gone from 600 down to 2.8, which I think you'll agree is a substantial change. So that's one image editing tool that you could use. Photoshop is expensive and there are alternatives, so let's have a look at a couple of other alternatives. Well, if you would like an alternative to Photoshop but a tool with just as much power, you might like to search for GIMP, G-I-M-P, and download a copy of GIMP, install it, and it can load this uncompressed TIFF file that we've been working with previously. It's got all the same tools that Photoshop had, so we can say go transform 90 degrees clockwise, and remember the image here is still this uncompressed TIFF form, and it's a very big image, and to reduce the image size we can export it as a JPEG image. You can see here we've got a lot of different types of file formats, but we'll export as a JPG file, and we'll make this one like we did before, AAA from GIMP, and now export it. And the software goes away and does that. There are some advanced options here, and you can sample in different ways. You can see how complex and powerful GIMP is. I'd be inclined to reduce your resolution down to about halfway and then say export. So it's now exporting a JPG file as AAA from GIMP. And if we go to our desktop now and have a look in our desktop, there's our AAA from GIMP, and we're down to, well, we've reduced the file a little, but we're still down to 21 megabytes, which I think is still too big. So you could use GIMP as a tool to do this, but now I want to show you a much simpler and quicker tool to use that is also free software. Well, I'd like to introduce Irfan View, and let's go File and Open, and on the desktop I've put the original TIFF file. Irfan View opens files of that type quite easily. It's going to take a while because, as you can see, a 622 megabyte file, and our aim is to reuse Irfan View. That's spelled I-R-F-A-N and then View. We can open the image file. So at this point I can easily take image and resample the image. I could choose my, let's say, 4,000 dots per inch. Well, before we do that, I'd forgotten image and rotate right counterclockwise. That's what we did in Photoshop and in GIMP. Now it's image resample. We'll go 4,000 wide and OK it at 150 dots per inch, and now we've resampled it. So now we can go File and Save As, and in the files of type here we can click there and pick JPG, and we don't want it in that folder but we want it on the desktop. So AAA from Irfan View, and click Save. So there we are. Now if we go back to the desktop and look at AAA from, I maybe have to refresh this, AAA from Irfan View, we now have a file that's 1.4 megabytes in size, and that's very easy to work with in gCADPlus. So let's have a look at it. So we've gone from 622 megabytes to 1.4 using a free tool that's very easy to use. So I can't emphasize it enough. You've even got tools like image auto adjust the colors just like you had in Photoshop. So if we zoom in, you'll see that even though this file is really small, we've still got plenty of resolution there. And here we are in the gCADPlus environment, and let's zoom in here. You can even see the tables and chairs sitting outside of that building there, and we can pan across, so you can see panning and zooming. We're not losing any speed at all now that we've got a very small image file. JPEG works well because it's compressed as distinct from the uncompressed file that came originally from the drone survey of the site.